right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Climbing Majority Podcast. We are sitting down here with a good friend of mine. We just had a big climbing weekend. We've been climbing together for several years, and you knew each other before we were both climbers. Bryce, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Pleasure.
Definitely, man. Happy to make this work. Yeah, I mean, let's just dive into it. I want to hear about, how you found climbing. Um, what about the sport called to you? Maybe some events in your life that kind of like led, we all kind of have these things where climbing clicks with us for certain reasons. So just kind of walk us through that.
Sure. Yeah, so I found climbing late 2019. I um was I had been, had a various things in my life before that, had found substances and then found sobriety from substances and then got married and then but still didn't really have like a primary hobby or anything. And I had listened to a podcast and they had mentioned climbing, and the host or the guest was talking about spray walls and just climbing in general. And I was like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. And then coincidentally, a couple friends of mine, like that weekend, were like, hey, do you want to go to the climbing gym with us? And I was like, yeah, that's funny. I had just heard about it and it sounds fun. So let's do it. So they took me to the gym. I immediately got a membership. Um, Recruited a buddy of mine from work to start going with me. And he was also a brand new climber. So he and I kind of got into it together at the gym, and then those same friends that got me into it said, "Hey, do you want to go climb outside with us?" Took me out to Dixon Lake. We did, I think, Butthole Express was my first outdoor climb ever. And then jumped on Y Crack also, um, just a little local crag where I'm from in Escondido, and it was awesome. I was hooked. I loved outdoor even more than the gym, and I'm guess the type that when I get into something, I kind of go pretty hard, and um, yeah, I just was hooked. So started climbing outside as much as I could with them, um, and yeah, the rest was history.
What about climbing outside drew you? Like, did you have an experience with like outdoor activities, hiking, camping? Like, was your family outdoorsy? Or like was this kind of like a first big exploration into outdoor activities?
I always camped as a kid. We would do lots of road trips up to Montana and camp all along the way, and so camping and outdoor. I was also would hunt a lot with my dad when I was a kid. So I learned to hate hiking at a really young age, and just sitting out in the cold for a very long time. We'd go like out elk hunting in Utah, and it'd be just brutal cold, and you just sit there for 8 hours waiting for an animal to walk by. So uh, all that aside, I did a lot of time in the outdoors as a kid, but never really found like a passion in it. And then yeah, but even before I started climbing, though, I started getting into hiking more. Um, I was coming off a long history of just playing lots of video games and sitting inside all the time, and I think it was just time that it finally clicked that I was like, this isn't what I want to do all the time. And so yeah, I started hiking a lot, and then shortly after found climbing and was like, oh yeah, hiking's only fun if you're getting to somewhere cool as a result. So I still do a lot of hiking, but for a different reason. But yeah, no, I don't know what about outdoor climbing drew me to it. I think it was just fun and novel, and you know, have always been attracted to climbing on ropes, getting high off the ground, and just doing what big objective kind of stuff. Even from the very beginning, it was like what I was drawn to. So yeah, I think just like the novelty of it.
Yeah, the funny thing, at least in my small social circle that know you as well, it's like the story. It's like, Bryce gets into climbing then and he's immediately, climbing 11 trad. At least that's what it feels like to us. So talk to us a little bit about your progression. I think that compared to most people, I would say it was pretty fast. So, correct me if I'm wrong, or explain your progression to kind of where you are now as a climber.
Yeah. Um, well, I think a lot of it was just the fact that I was like just a go getter and I just wanted to learn everything I could. And so, like, really early on, I think I started climbing at the gym in like October of 2019. And for Christmas, all I wanted was like a 70-meter rope so I could go, do my own stuff and not rely on my friends. And I, just YouTube videos, oh, how to rappel, how to do this and that. And but I'll tell you, my the first rappel I ever did was at Dixon Lake, and I was with my wife, and I knew nothing, and I only had an ATC because I used it at the gym and a 70-meter rope, and I was like, I'm gonna go rappel. So I go and I find this cool overhanging route at Dixon, except it didn't have any wrap rings, it didn't have links, it didn't have anything. It was just bolts. And me not knowing any better, I just ran the rope straight through the bolts and wrapped off. It was like super nerve wracking, but I, got to the bottom. I was like, cool, that went really good. And later I was telling my buddy who taught me how to climb outside, and he's like, oh yeah, like, oh, you went straight through the bolts? Like that's not good. So I think I was a little too ambitious at times, but I think it also just led to me putting in a lot of mileage early on. My same buddy Micho that I got into the gym with me, and I got him to start going outdoors with me. I got super stoked on multi pitch just because, why not climb lots, like even higher. So we went out to Corte Madera, and it was both of our first time doing a multi pitch, and we did sunset streaks, and you have to wrap in to start. And so we go wrap in, and I think it was like our second rappel ever on a multi pitch, and our rope got stuck. And we kind of just figured it out. Luckily, it ended up getting unstuck. But I guess all that's to say, like, I just kind of would do as much research as I needed to do to feel confident, and then I would just go out there and do it. And I was always happy to be like a leader, even though um, I was a little green. But eventually, those same friends, Zach and Deb, that got me into outdoor climbing, Zach and his brother took me out to Joshua Tree. And that was like my first, like, wow experience where I just truly got inspired. But I hadn't been doing much camping or anything at that time. So they're like, hey, you want to go for the weekend? I'm like, heck yeah, let's go. I go out there, realized I forgot my sleeping bag. And so I pretty much froze like the whole time we were out there. They both were like far more experienced than me, but they were both like wanting to climb like 5'4" to 5'6" stuff. And we ended up getting on this weird, it was like the first night we were there, we were trying to find this one climb that was like probably a 5'7" or something, and we ended up on this like 10 minus super grainy slab climb, bolts. And obviously sport climbs in Joshua Tree aren't exactly friendly to the beginner leader, but um I was like, yeah, I'll go for it, sure. And I remember just doing these like gecko hand moves, like just hanging on to little crystals and like learning to slab climb for the first time. And I on-sighted this 10 minus and was like, should have been like completely freaked out, I think, but it was like, wow, that was really cool. And um, I took my first trad lead there. I did Nectar. It's like a 5'4" up on Isle in the Sky by Bird of Fire. And then that was when I saw Bird of Fire for the first time, and it was just like so inspiring. There was some young kid who's probably like 15 climbing with his dad, and he just like flew up that. Wow, that looks so cool. And I remember talking to his dad, and I was like, "Oh yeah, are you guys climbing that thin climb?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, it's not really that thin." And at the time, I was like, "Well, okay, whatever." But now I understand a little bit where he was coming from, and but yeah, it was just really cool. That first Joshua Tree trip definitely sparked my fire for trad, and so I was set on learning how to do it. And like I said, just kept kept going out and learning and getting shut down on at Mount Woodson, but kept going back. And yeah, eventually have had some cool stories to tell from it. So
What's like your allure into climbing just from like do you find that it's more about like a means to an end to seek adventure, or do you really really enjoy challenging yourself? And of course there's a spectrum in there, but
yeah, I think it's mostly. I don't think it's a means to an end. I think it's just enjoying the actual climbing. Like the act of climbing is fun. But adventure and suffering. There's something weird about suffering that you hate it while you're doing it, and then as soon as you're done, a week goes by, and you're like, oh, I really want to do that again. Like that was heinous, but yeah, let's see if we can schedule that again. So um, I forget exactly what you were asking, but I think
No, I think that was perfect. I mean, it makes me think like I think Jimmy Chin in like Meru was quoted like the best climbers are the ones with the shortest memories. You know, it's like pretty true.
yeah,
It's like go have the most awful experience, and then for some reason it's like this like transcending experience that you feel fulfilled and just satisfied in life, and then a week later you forget all the bad things and only the good aspects of it, and you're like, let's do that again.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's like the combination of the mental fortitude that it takes and the mental workout as well as the physical. It's like combining both of those just for a really full experience. And it. I think that one nice thing too is like as I mean, I'm 35. I'm not young, not old, I would say, but I tend to be less and less motivated to work out as now. Sure, we'll get into it later, but I got a couple kids and I work a desk job now, and it's really hard to find the motivation to just go out and stay in shape. But when you have a awesome hobby that you're just completely stoked on, you have no problem doing a 2-hour approach up a boulder field and sweating your butt off and feeling miserable because, yeah, it's the means to an end. So, in that sense, I think it's just really healthy um, having something
Yeah,
you're
no,
passionate about.
I think that's a really, really interesting point. Like, I just turned 30. The last like several weeks for me were really, really busy. I hadn't been in a good exercise schedule. I wasn't eating well. I was too stressed out, all that kind of stuff. And like, I know for myself, like I want to be a dad, like Ray and I, my partner, we talk about that, like having kids. And, I sometimes think I'm like, how am I going to continue to do this? And like, deal with kids and all these other things in my life. Like that seems like such an interesting challenge. But ultimately, I also think like it is kind of like a challenge. Like you can maybe find a way to optimize to still have some balance in your life. Like, of course, it's not like you're going to be like 25 with very little responsibility and you just go climb 6 days a week or something. Like life changes for sure. But what has that been like navigating that for yourself? Like, how do you navigate that?
Well, I found climbing after I was married, and so my wife didn't know I was going to be climbing obsessed when she married me. So early on, when I got super into it, it's a hard hobby to San Diego is not a bad place to be a climber, but it's also not the best place to be a climber. The best place to be a climber is in your van, living at the crag. So I got super stoked on that dream. But my wife's definitely a homebody, and we had to come to terms with that balance. Um, and I think it's good because it keeps, I love my marriage, I love my wife, and having something besides. If it wasn't for that, like I might have just been so obsessed with climbing that, like you said, I want to do it 6 days a week. And getting into it in your 30s, your body's not able to do that, and so you have to take rest days, and having something to do on the rest days is really good too. And I'm experiencing that full fold now. Having two young kids, I got two under two right now, um, and that's been a huge change. I can look at like my tick history on Mountain Project, and I was putting in the miles for sure. 2021 was like the first year I really was climbing a lot outside, and then 2022 was definitely slowed down when I had my first kid. So, but even that said, like it's so great to have something besides, like to have two passions now. I got my family, I got my climbing, um, and recently I busted my finger, my ring finger on my left hand. It was like exactly the same time as my second son was born, and normally that would have just destroyed me like mentally and been like such a bummer because I took 2 months off from climbing. But I actually found it super enjoyable to take the break, and I found that like my family time was even more precious, and just more, the rest of my life was even more enjoyable during that time, even without climbing. And that's something that I like wouldn't have expected beforehand. So balance is really good, even though I do go pretty all into this stuff. So.
One thing you said to me that made sense, or that kind of was an interesting perspective, was how how your marriage and how having kids and how having a life outside of climbing has shaped the objectives that you choose. You said it kind of made you a bit more choosy and you're like, have to plan a little bit more. You're like, if I'm going to spend my time away from my family, I want to be doing something that really inspires me. Talk to us a little bit about that and how your fatherhood and your being a parent has shaped how you choose and view climbing.
Yeah. So when I was, super gung ho before kids and just all I wanted to do was climb, you look at Mountain Project, you look at YouTube, Instagram, all these people climbing all over the world, and you're like, man, there's so much rock out there. I will never be able to climb it all. And that's kind of a like hopeless feeling because all you see all these amazing places. And even though, my wife and I did lots of road trips and I got to see some amazing climbing places. I mean, for being only a 2-3 year climber at that time, like I had really explored quite a lot of like the Western US and destinations. But I still just always felt like, oh man, I'm just never going to be able to climb everything I want to. Um, but now that I have kids, I don't really have that desire anymore to just climb everything. It's like I have certain things that are the most inspiring, and that you know those are the things that I will dedicate the time for. But because my time is so valuable and because I enjoy my time with my family so much, it's like, yeah, even leaving for 2 days is a lot when like that's time that I don't get to spend with them. So I think like I was saying, I just climb much more um, objective focused and I base my year, my trips, like scheduling out for 2024. It's like, okay, what are the 3 to 5 most inspiring things? And it's not necessarily like objectives like grade wise, but just like cool stuff that's been on my list forever. Um, and I really just try to put my focus on that. Whereas in the past, you got to just like, oh, cool, I got 2 days off work. I'll go out to here. I got 3 days off work. I'll go, just every single chance you get. I kind of that doesn't happen as much anymore. So yeah, choosing your climbs wisely, and I think it's also made me value partners a lot more because in the past it was like, oh yeah, I'll just go climb with whoever because I just want to get miles. But now it's like I really want that experience to count. I really want it to be full value, fun, safe. You got to take risk. Risk takes a whole new approach having kids too. That kind of shaped my climbing. It didn't really slow me down, I would say, but it definitely just added another level of contemplation and another factor that goes into like me while I'm climbing or what I'm choosing to climb. So
What does partners and choosing partners look like now? Like, do you have someone that you climb with regularly? Are you searching for people on Mountain Project? Like, what does that look like for you?
no, I have a few like main partners. The partners that I have are great. I guess it seems like you could always use more really good partners. Um, and I had a couple partners here and there that come and go, whether they move. I had a really good buddy, Josh, who moved to Salt Lake City. I had a really good partner, Cam, who just kind of lost interest in trad. Um, and then I have a couple other partners. I think Evan was recently on the pod. He's one of my main San Diego partners. We climb a lot. And then um, I've climbed with you a handful of times and have had awesome experiences every time. Um, but yeah, I guess in the past I would just, oh, I have 2 days to climb here. Go on Mountain Project. Who can go climb with me? And now that just doesn't sound as fun. I would rather trust that it's going to be a good experience every time. And partners are super important for that. So valuing fun, safety, and just people that you vibe with. So
For sure. It is cool to build like a community of people, not only locally, but like nationally, where you're like, hey, I'm in town, and they're psyched to climb with you. And it's like, you get to rekindle that partnership. And, it's just kind of like you're back to that mountain partnership right away, even though you spent a lot of time, away from each other or whatever. It's just kind of like click. So it's cool to have that network of people.
one thing I was talking about recently is with my wife is like I have a lot of friends like that don't climb that are great friends. I really value them. But there's something about a climbing partner that you just spend so much time together. And like when you're on a wall with somebody for 8 hours, or if you're on a weekend trip or whatever, like you're just with that person for so long. it's not really about like the substance. It's not really about what you talk about. It's about the experience. And I think that just builds like a super deep connection. And it it it's like a it's a great friendship, but it's also like a different friendship. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing, but I think in part it's suffering, and in certain experiences there's a degree of vulnerability, and it also just tends to completely eviscerate the superficial bullshit of the world, like I don't really care about whatever such and such thing that was lightly bothering me back home when I haven't had like a glass of water in 3 hours, and I feel like crap in my pants, and it's like, and you get to like suffer and experience that with somebody. I feel like the kind of like bond you can build with people going through that, and also being in a circumstance where you're legitimately trusting your life. Like, it's not like metaphorical, or I would trust my life to you as a person. It's like I literally am putting my life in your hands as my partner. And that's also like this really interesting kind of bond that you build. And yeah, I think climbing's just such an interesting way to experience the world, and also to build these really, really tight bonds with people and experience things. And
I think Kyle and I are both laughing at you saying that
Yeah.
because yesterday we had that exact experience. We climbed Eagle Dance yesterday, and we were simul gree rapping, and on one of the wraps it was a rope stretcher, and we were both super aware. We were watching the end the whole time, so it wasn't like it was actually sketchy. But Kyle just called it
We
out,
didn't tie knots on the end.
and Kyle just called it out, and he said, "I'm like 6 feet away from killing both of us." And it wasn't again, it wasn't like a surprise. It wasn't like we had a close encounter, but you're that close to the end of both of us going off, and so it's just that you always have to be mindful. You can never get complacent, and you just have to trust your partner. And Kyle kept
Yeah.
us
yeah,
both alive. So
Yeah, it is interesting. I think about it too, like when you're driving a car, like, everybody drives a car every day, and you're a split second away from just like, sorry, everybody else, and to making a left turn and just like running into people. And like, like you could kill people, you could kill yourself with a second decision. Like you're driving a death machine. And like, it's the same thing with climbing. It's like, I was literally 5 feet away from the end of a rope with no knot. And it's like, that's how Brad Gobright died. His buddy wrapped off the end and they both fell. Like, well, Brad Gobright died, unfortunately, and the buddy who wrapped off the end of his rope didn't die. He hit a shelf, which is a whole nother situation. But yeah, it's like not only in those situations where it's acutely obvious. Like every time you clip your PAS to the anchor, every time you build an anchor, if it's there's these decisions you make every step of the way where you're just like a few decisions away from total catastrophe. And that's like the weird thing about climbing. It's like you can convince yourself that it's really safe, and it is really safe until it's not, and then it's extremely deadly. It's
mhm.
like there's a cliff there of like safety and just everything's fucked. And
Yeah.
so it's just like a really, really fine line to dance. And I think this is an interesting point too, Bryce. You were saying yesterday you had this feeling a little bit where you were just like the risk or the element of danger was a bit more heightened, and you've had that experience before. It was just overwhelming on the top of the hourglass on the
Mhm.
brownstone wall. Um, and yeah, it's like, we have these moments where we can look around at the reality of the situation that we're in as climbers. It's like, I'm hanging off the edge of a cliff. Like if anything falls or if anything doesn't work, like if this, I buy this, nylon sling or this Dyneema sling, and I'm like, that's the only thing that's attaching me to this wall. Like, you kind of have these visions in your brain of it just breaking all of a sudden, and that's it. It's over. And the line between safety and danger is just like can be very apparent, or we can like tune it out. It's all about our systems. It's just an interesting dance.
I think there's another side to that coin, though, and it perfectly ties into what you were talking about with driving a car. Is there are actually lots of things we do on a daily basis, just operating in modern societies, that are actually really, really dangerous, that we don't have a culture of like, when's the last time you sat in your motor vehicle in the morning? You're like, all right, statistically, this is really, really dangerous. Tons of
Yeah.
people die. This is very, you have like your like before leading the multi-pitch, like safety talk or something with like your buddy in your car in the passenger seat. Oh, make sure you're buckled up. And it's like nobody does that. It's so automated at this point. You just get in, you go, you totally take for granted that you're in like a steel rectangle that's moving like a missile, you know? And so like that is the other side of the coin, that you can kind of like choose your risk in some ways, you know, and I think in climbing, it's like, yeah, we calculate that risk and try and make it as safe as possible to have these really meaningful experiences. And I can't like name the amount of times I've thought in my life, like, you know, I could just die tomorrow crossing the street by having like a bus run me over. It's like I don't like bank my life on that, but it's like sometimes where I'm like, oh, maybe I shouldn't like do this thing. I'm like, I don't think I'm like, you know, I'm gonna regret that when I'm 80 that I like chose to do that or try to have that experience, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, climbing is just so much about realizing the danger, realizing that there is risk involved, but then being able to like logically and consistently like parse out what is real and what is like perceived. And I think that's one of the things that, I guess, tying back to how I progressed quickly, was just having a strong head game is so much of climbing. And I don't know how you like train your head game. I'm sure there's videos of like training yourself to fall and all this stuff, but I think when it really comes down to um, even yesterday, you mentioned how I said I was kind of just in like a slight funk of like, and it was probably because I got my butt kicked on out of control yesterday, which was extremely hard, uh, almost whipped. But I think I was just physically tired too, and like I'm not in as perfect shape as I wish I was and used to be or something. But uh, I was, yeah, just a little more hesitant than normal, and like at the blaze thinking like, oh, this is pretty crazy. We're like 500 feet up, you know, like you said, I'm on this nylon 8 millimeter PAS, like, okay. But then once you start climbing, like I think you just have that ability, hopefully, to just get rid of that and just climb and enjoy it and have fun, because it is so fun. And you know, if the systems are in place, like the risk is very low. It's very, very low. If you know, unless you're leading over obscure gear like you guys have, I guess. Which
Yeah,
I'm
I
sure
think
I have too. I
yeah,
have been
and that's
very
the thing. It's
fortunate.
like there's so many moments in climbing where like if you would have fallen, things could have been really bad, but you don't.
100%.
And so like a lot of safety in climbing lies in just not falling in general. It lowers your chances of things going wrong because you're not having to test the systems that you've put in place. And I think that that was one thing I learned early on in my climb, well, especially from my accident, was like head game was never my issue. I had the best head game. Like I
Mm,
could be, you know, over gear, you know, feeling really good. But the problem was that I had too much faith in one, my climbing ability not to fall, and two, too much faith in my own systems when I didn't do the research enough to like actually have a strong enough foundation to really know whether it's good or not. And so that, you know, and I just ever since my accident, I like would go back and recount all the climbs I did and be like, okay, you know, like what if I had fallen here? Because I do a lot of GoPro footage and stuff, and so I can like rewatch my climbs. And so like there's so many climbs where I look back, I'm just like, God damn it, Kyle, like that is just
that janky nut would not have held me.
yeah, you're like you're 25 feet past this janky nut and you're just like totally locked in, you know, and
Yeah,
it's like,
there's
yeah,
a
you
ledge 20 feet down.
yeah, exactly. You know, it's like, yeah. And then like, instead of like, you know, realizing the risk in the moment, I'm like, yeah, I linked pitch 1 and 2 with only 10 pieces. I'm so sick, you know? And so just like the completely wrong mindset there. But yeah, it's just interesting to like have the head game because it can carry you really far, like to just
Mm.
not be scared and to be focused and just proficient and athletic. Like you can get really, really far in climbing, but then the second you're not and things go wrong, you don't have that foundation of safety and understanding that, you know, whether you can or cannot fall is super, super important.
Yeah, I only have one like almost deck story, but it was right after my first son was born. I was very sleep deprived. It was like my first outdoor trip in a long time, or you know, like a month or two or something. And I go out to Joshua Tree with my buddy Josh, and we're like, hey, we're gonna do 10 510s in a day because I really want to get the most out of my day. And so I think this was like number 3 or 4, and we were doing clean and jerk. And of course, we didn't pick a bunch of 10As. Like we were doing a 10C on our 10-10 day, which was a lot anyways. But on clean and jerk, you like climb up about 10-15 feet. You place a number 1, which is really good. And then you're supposed to start moving right. And I, was on sighting. I was sleep deprived, had already climbed a bit. I think I woke up at 2 that morning because my son had woken up. So I like fed him and then just headed out. And um, I totally had like a mental like panic mode that I've never really experienced before. And so I think it was just those factors. But I was supposed to move just right. And like the next placement was like within arm's reach to my right, like a point 0.5 or a nut bomber. And instead I was just got focused looking straight up and left. And it kind of got like, I was like, oh man, there's no pro here, and started getting pumped. So I tried to just like exit the climb out and left, and there was nothing there. And I just got pumped out and fell off. And, I was like, my feet were probably at the piece or like a little higher than that. And I just swung. And I remember just watching the boulders because it's kind of like bouldery at the bottom there, but it's pretty flat. But I just remember watching them, like, I just swung right over top of them near deck. And I was like, whoa, that was weird. Like, I have never panicked like that, and I almost just hit the deck, and I took like 10 minutes or something. I shook it off, and then I red pointed it. But
Nice.
it was just that was like a really close. I mean, man, that was super close to definitely busting my ankles and probably breaking a leg. And it was just,
Yeah,
I would have never thought that as I headed up onto this 10C that I thought was well within my ability.
it can happen fast.
Yeah.
Let's dive into out of control since we just kind of teased that a little bit. I'll preface this, so Bryce came out, we've been climbing Red Rock the last 2 days. One thing I've learned about Bryce, and I probably already knew this, is I mean, just cause limited time frame, he's like, I need to hit a lot of stuff. Like we're gonna hit a lot of pitches, we're gonna do a lot of mileage. And I'm like, I don't know if my ankle can handle it. But I was psyched to go out, and we did 9 pitches the day one, and then we did 10 pitches day two. So the most mileage I've done in 2 days since my accident, which was awesome. So I thank you, Bryce, for that. And first day, the last climb we did was called Out of Control. And yeah, I mean, Bryce took the lead on the onsite, and yeah, tell us.
Um, well, yeah, I mean, it was 10C. It was seemed like a classic, lot highly rated, and we had done other 10 pluses. I think that at least one, or yeah, maybe one. I think we did like a 10C earlier in the day that we both cruised up. So I wasn't really thinking much of it. I looked at the post and it said standard rack, and so I was like, okay, cool. I got a double rack. This will be totally fine. And it's just a splitter, like point 0.5, 0.75 crack, like for 100 feet. It's phenomenal. But I definitely, I guess, was a little short on the point 0.5s and 0.75s because I only had two. And I also didn't realize that the crux, the 10C crux, is like an off width, which 10C off width's a lot different than 10C like face or finger crack. So I typically think of myself as a decent off width climber, but I placed I had 1.4 with me, luckily, but I placed it pretty low below the bulge, and then I got up into the bulge, and the number 4 was like a few feet below me, below my feet, I would say. And I'm like, climb up and over this bulge, like everything was great, but then once you get over the bulge, it's like a 0.5 crack that just like slopes away from you. So you're trying to like reach way up above you and trying to get over this bulge, but it pinches down to like 3 or 4 inches, so you can't get your knee up through the off width. So you're having to like get your body away from the wall to try to mantle up and get your knee over the bulge while you're reaching like as deep as you can into the point 0.5 crack in the back, and it's like pinching down, and my helmet kept like keeping me from getting further, and I just like for some reason could not get my knee over this bulge. And finally I was like, hey, watch me here. And then I was still trying it, and I was like, I'm pumped out. And I was like falling, and I was fully expecting to go pretty far. But as I slid down, my arm, like my forearm, got lodged in the like the off width of the bulge, and it just caught me. And I was like, oh, cool, not falling. Like, wow. And then from there, I was able to down climb a little. I got like a super bomb like knee jam in the off width, and I just sat there on the knee jam for like 10 minutes. I depumped. I down climbed a little more. I retrieved my 4, I went back up and actually placed the 4 in the bulge, so it was better protected, and I somehow managed to. It was still super hard the second go. I think that was the closest to throwing up I've ever been climbing. Like I was just so gassed. Um, but I did it. I made it. But yeah, that was very unexpected. I was uh, like like you were saying, Kyle. Sometimes you just super close to taking a big fall and you just don't expect it.
Before you had even said like "watch me" or whatever, like I saw your feet like skating on the face, like slipping in the off with. I'm like, holy fuck, this guy's gonna come off. Like I need to be, I need to be fucking ready. And it was like another minute and a half of that before you were like, oh, falling. You were just like going for it, man. It was sick to see.
Yeah,
Uh,
that took it out of me for sure.
and
That
we had
humbled
already
me
done,
too.
yeah, 8 pitches up to that point too. So just like a full day. Um, Another thing I thought was an interesting talking point from that day was our experience on Birdland with the party at the base. I think that I don't know if we've talked about this, but like etiquette for multi pitch, especially on classic climbs, where there tends to be the dreadful Congo line. So talk to us a little bit about what happened when we showed up and kind of the decision processes in place that we made that day with the people at the base.
Yeah. So Birdland 5.7 plus classic moderate climb in Red Rocks. It's been on my list ever since I've looked at Red Rocks just because I like doing classics. But every single time I've walked by, it's just the Congo line, like you said. And you had convinced me that it wouldn't be the case because it was a Friday. And I was like, okay, sure. So I drove up, yes, the Friday morning. And so I think I got into town around 7:30, and then we got out there pretty casually. And right when we got to the base, there was a party of 3 that were just starting. And we said, oh, are you guys on Birdland? Yeah, okay, we're thinking of doing the same thing, but it's probably not smart to like wait on you guys because you're a party of 3. And so we quick looked at the guidebook and found out that we could probably take this climb right next to it and just like skirt around them and kind of link pitch to one of that with 2 of Birdland and get ahead of them. So I guess I don't know if we announced that to them, but we kind of just like went for it and they ended up being a very fast party of 3. So like I linked 1 and 2 and got onto Birdland in front of them. But by the time like Kyle started climbing, they had already finished pitch 1. And so they did wait for us for maybe like 2 or 3 minutes while Kyle finished. And then we were very quickly out of their way. And I mean, I don't remember how long it took us, like an hour or something to do all of Birdland. It was very quick. But I guess the, cutting in front of somebody's not cool, but also who wants to wait for a party of 3 when you're just going to like romp up something. But I don't know where I stand on that. I think they were super cool about it. They were really awesome. All 3 of them were just like, well, whatever. We're just having a good time. Um, I think if they were like try harding, like that was their limit, they probably would have been a little more pissed. But it, it ended up working out really good. But I've had bad experiences where I've waited a long time on people.
Yeah, we had like a whole day plan too. It was like this is just the warm up. It's like let's get in, get out. And I think that this it's just a great example. I think that's just a good talking point. For us all to kind of dive into our own experiences and thoughts on this. Like you said, Bryce, I've had multiple experiences with people that either want to pass me or people that are disrespectful to the space that we have. Like okay, I'll go in the first one. Dark Shadows. We get to the base and we're first, and then like 30 seconds later, another party comes up behind us. And, I'm already flaking the rope and they're like antsy, they're like, they really want to get past us. I can tell. And previous to this, in the Black Canyon, I had a party that came up behind us while I was already like climbing the end of pitch 1. And as Hannah started to come up pitch 1, they immediately started climbing behind her, like, 50 feet. And they did that the entire way up. And even to the point where they were just like kind of standing next to her at the belay, just kind of like on lead, just kind of waiting for her to leave the station, just like unnecessarily crowding us. And so I had a bit of a bad taste in my mouth with people following behind. And so I come off pretty heated. I'm just like, so you're going to be on our ass or what? And then he's like, that's the wrong question. He's like getting all heated back, and I was like, "All right, cool. I get it. I came off a little hot." And so I was just like, "Look, dude, are you fast?" Like, or what's your plan here? And they're like, "Yeah, dude, we're trying to like get up this really quick." I was like, I put my ego aside, and I was like, "Fine, it's cool. Go ahead. Like I'm trying to have a chill day. I don't want to have to worry about you guys being upset and just being on my ass the whole day." And so I let them go, and sure enough, they just like ripped up it. And so it's like there's like this thing you got to balance. It's like, you were there first. So technically, like you do have rights to climb it whenever you want. But at the same time, it's like there's other people involved. And so, what is the best decision for everybody involved here? Max, what kind of experiences with this kind of situation have you had?
Yeah, I think there's so many caveats to what's going on. Like generally for me, anytime I show up behind a party at a multi pitch or something like classic climbs we're talking about and stuff, it's just like kill them with kindness, man. Communicate, ask the person, don't climb up their ass. If it's a really friendly and you're like legitimately super speedy and you think you can pass them, like you can try and arrange that. My like default modality is just like chill as a cucumber. It's like if I'm in a rush, like that's my problem, not the group ahead of me's problem, and they're a newer climber, they don't feel good, you're giving them anxiety, you're pressuring them, they change their leading style. You're kind of like just ruining somebody's day, potentially making them make a decision that could injure themselves. You know what I mean? Like I think there's just so many variables to that. So like my thought process of it is like kill them with kindness. Fortunately, I've never really had any like horror stories or issues. The only one I've ever had was actually ice climbing. Like Ray and I were climbing the plum here in BC, and like I pitch one, like this guy literally climbing right up Ray's ass, which in ice climbing is like just insanity. It's like there's
Crazy.
falling ice.
Yeah.
All this is like, what the fuck are you doing? Like I was just in disbelief, and he was like, and then we get up and pitch one, and it's also like avalanche terrain, so like and we got there really early, first people on the climbs, everything. And then he was like, "Oh, do you guys like we're gonna try and pass you?" I was like, "Yeah, no, like no, you're not. It's like this is you could trigger an avalanche above us. I'm like, you're not even being that much faster than us. Like it was just like this is not happening." And of course, like he hadn't even pulled up his second, and he actually raced us to the start of the next pitch and then tried to climb like up and over me, and he wasn't even faster than us. And after that pitch where he tried that, I was like, okay, like fuck you guys, go do your thing. Backed off, and they weren't even faster in the end. Like we got to the crux, WI5 pitch, and now we had to wait there for like 45 minutes while these guys were climbing. And it was like, like it was so unnecessary. It was so rude. Like to this day, I found the guy on Instagram. I know his name. I've actually met him before at the Lillooet Ice Fest and like had conversations with him. And I was just like, I was just so shocked that like you would fucking do that. Like I couldn't believe it personally. Like my initial thoughts were like literally like getting in a fist fight on this ice climb with this guy because I thought that was just insanely disrespectful. So yeah, I don't know. I think there's just lots of considerations that is particular because you're now like lots of objective like overhead hazard and falling, like so I think that's even different than on rock. But yeah, I don't know. In general, like your problems are your problems. You know what I mean? Like if that makes sense. It's like, hey, I'm climbing this crack. I'm sorry that I woke up an hour before you and you really want to
Exactly.
get to the top really fast, but like, you're kind of just ruining my day by like climbing up my ass or something. So, but at the same time, like you also have to share, right? So I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like well, I was gonna say 2 things. It's kinda like driving on the freeway. Like, we all think I mean, some people if somebody's on your tail, like, clearly they wanna go faster than you. It doesn't matter how fast you're driving. You could be driving 100, and if somebody's on your tail, they wanna go faster than you, so just get over. And I think that's kinda my approach is, like, if somebody is behind me and I think they're gonna go faster than me, then I have no problem just waiting at a belay and giving them a pitch. I think more often than not, as a somewhat faster climber, it tends to be the other way where I'm waiting. And then I think it's their right to choose whether they want to let somebody pass them or not. But it's like you said, it takes a bit of communication and a bit of grace from both people to kind of come to a working conclusion. We're all trying to get to the same place and enjoy the same climb. So let's like all have a good day about it. When I did epinephrine, I was telling Kyle about this. We like my buddy and I got to the crag like right as it, we hiked in super early in the dark, got there right as it was getting light, and there was another duo that was like pretty much pacing with us the entire approach. And so neither of us were trying to like be jerks and say, "Oh, it's ours first." So we kind of hashed it out at the base because we all got there at the same time. And I was like, "How fast do you guys think you're going to climb?" And he's like, "Well, how fast are you going to climb?" I was like, "Well, I think if you're asking me that, I think I'm going to climb faster than you, but I'm not sure. Like, I think we're going to fly up this, like, to be honest." And they're like, "Okay, cool. Yeah, you can go first." And so they let us go first. We start up the first pitch, and I get, you know, a little bit up the climb, and I'm like, "Oh, dude, there's a party in front of us." There was already 2 people on the climb, and we were waiting for them. And then I realized there was a party in front of them. So I don't know what time these guys started climbing, but they were when we got to the base when it was getting light out. They must have been like on the first or second pitch of the chimney already. So um, anyways, I was going to say we were the guy in front of us. I think his name was Carlos from LA. So shout out if you're there, Carlos. But
What's up,
he
Carlos?
he was getting guided up, so he was following everything, and the guy that was leading was his guide, and he was just taking his sweet time. Even before the chimneys, he was like really struggling on like pitch 3 or something like that, and we're like, man, this isn't going to go good. And so we got to the chimneys and he was on the first pitch of the chimneys and we're sitting there at the belay. The other duo that was climbing like caught up to us. So there's the 4 of us on the belay waiting at the base of the chimneys for Carlos to finish like the first pitch. And he's taking his sweet time. He stops in the middle of the pitch. He takes his GoPro out and he's like, "Hey," like GoProing himself. Like, and I yelled at him. I was like, "Carlos," because we had talked to him at the ledge, but I was like, "Carlos, there's 4 of us waiting on you, dude. Like, can you try to climb a little faster?" Like that time I was a little like, I thought it was fair to say like, "Hey, this isn't the time to whip out your GoPro and just have a blast when 4 people are waiting for you." And I think his ego took a check at that because the rest of the climb we didn't really wait for him at all. He just started ripping. So maybe it was good for me to say that.
Yeah. I do have like 2 more things I can interject here on that. Like, of course, if there is somebody who is highly competent and really smooth at climbing, like when Ray and I were climbing Yak Peak, this group just came behind us that was simuling, and like for every 5 plate pieces I was placing, this guy's placing like 1 piece, just like it's like no problem, dude. Have at her. You know what I mean? Like you're gonna be up this climb when I'm like halfway on this thing, like mosquito eaten and like dead and sunbathed. So it's totally fine. Pass. I actually have a funny. There's like one of the classic climbs in Squamish is like they call it the Bud Light, and you can access it a whole bunch of other ways. All these like classic, kind of 5, 7, 8, 9 multi pitches, and it's a 5-9 with a bolted protected area that goes to these really cool ledge systems, and then it goes into like this like really small 5-8 chimney. And so we get to the base of this thing. It's like midday, caked, in the sun, like just baking. And there was like, oh my God, I think it was 4 parties. So 3 at the base, 1 just past the 5-9 crux, and then there was this party of 3 in this 5-8 chimney. And like they're just one of their group members was just pretty much like stuck, like just couldn't climb it. And we just like sat down, waited for like 45 minutes at least or more, just like sitting there, like unable to, do anything or move. And like the other routes up there, didn't make sense for us to do. And so that was kind of a bummer, it was like, but like at that point, there's so many people. Like we were joking, it was like the Hillary step on Everest, where there's like the lineup of like 100 people like trying to get by. And I said we should like petition Squamish rock climbing to rename it the Hillary step, but didn't go that far. Yeah.
Bryce, you had a moment for White Maiden's Walkway that I thought was really funny.
Yeah. So Evan, who, like I mentioned earlier, one of my partners, he was wanting to go do his first big trad lead out at Idlewild, which is my like home crag, my stomping ground. That's kind of where I cut my trad teeth. But he was wanting to get into trad leading, and so he was going to go do White Maiden's Walkway 5-4, a little bit more engaging than the trough. I've heard. I still haven't done it, but and I was just going to follow him and support him, and so we're hiking up, and I actually had to like I like had to stop and use the bathroom, so I like went off the trail and came back, and this couple starts passing us, and it was a guy and a girl, and so we're like, this was right as I was getting back on the trail. I'm like, oh, what are you guys going to do? And like White Maidens Walkway. I'm like, okay, cool, that's what we were gonna do too. And I was like, but it's my buddy's, first time, so we're like chilling. We'll take our time. And the guy like heard that and just booked it. Like he was just man on a mission. Left his girlfriend in the dust. Like she was hiking up. We pretty much hiked up the entire approach and all the way to the base of the crack with her because he just pieced out and was gone. And like he was probably like racked up ropes, like everything ready to go by the time she got there. He was just really excited to be first, and we had no problem with that. I knew we were going to be slow. It was my buddy's first trad lead, and so while they're doing their thing on the first pitch, I'm teaching Evan a little bit of like reminders on anchor building and this and that and whatnot. And we wait for like an hour or so, and the guy like finally finishes leading the first pitch, and the girl follows in quick fashion, and she gets up to the first pitch belay, and so we're just sitting there waiting, and he's talking to her, and they're like doing snacks and drinks and just hanging out. And like another like 20 minutes goes by, and they're still at the first pitch anchor. I'm like, okay, at this point, I think it's intentional, and he just wants us to pick a different climb. Like I think he's just like, this is my first big lead, and I don't want anybody around me. So we ended up just doing the trough and had a good experience over there. But that was probably the douchiest experience I've ever had with other climbers. But I guess that's what you get when you go to do like a super moderate climb at a big crag where everybody wants to have their first big lead. So
Yeah.
Sure. It pays to climb hard.
yeah, it does, man. If you can climb 5'10", I think you can skip like half the crowd.
For me, I have a pretty stark rule. It's like one party ahead, I'll wait as long as they're looking proficient and it's not a shit show. Two parties, I'm pretty much going to skip it and look for something else. Like that's a hard line. Three, no way. Like a hard line, no way. And the funny thing is for me, it's like the fact that Congo lines even exist in the first place. Like why are people sitting at a base of a climb for 5 hours to get on the climb? It's like it's lunacy. Like we were doing Cloud Tower and I walked past Chris and Chrysalis. There was a party of 3 leading pitch 2, a party of 2 leading pitch 1, and a party of 3 waiting to get on the climb. I'm just like, go somewhere else. I don't know. It's like, there's so much to do out here. Why do you have to do this single climb? And, it was very obvious that the party of 3, like, didn't really know what they were doing. It was like, very, not a situation of efficiency or competency. And so it's just like all the flags are there. And I just walk past, I was like, God, what a shit show. It's like, I can't believe people are willing to like put themselves through that first place. I like to attribute it or compare it to like people waiting like an hour in line for an In-N-Out. Like, they see the line just like go around the entire block. It's like you could go to Safeway and buy a sandwich and be home, 15 minutes, but you're going to sit there in your car for an hour and a half for an In-N-Out burger.
Or just go in and it would.
Yeah, that's the thing too. It's like get out of your car and walk in. Yeah, get out of your car and walk in, and you can have a burger in 10 minutes instead of the entire line. Just crazy.
I've seen that at like Squamish, like North Apron and stuff. A lot of like the more classic, like moderate multi-pitch climbs where you get like there's like 3 different or 4 different groups waiting at the base, and there it's even particularly weird because there's like 6 climbs right in a row that are all moderate, so you could just go right to the next one and like climb that one. But I also think on some level it's a lot of the time, like probably less adventurous, less experienced climbers. They looked at that route, they planned it, they drove up from the city, and then you get there and there's a group and it's like, I just think some people, like their experience with climbing is like, they're not just like on a dime willing to be like, oh shit, no problem, I do this, just deal with the plan. It's like that's kind of their day, like that's how they plan. So I also have some like respect for that, like not wanting to just like fully 180 or something. But sometimes I do see that. I'm like, bro, there is a really great 5'8", just like 100 feet to your right, and you're gonna wait behind like 3 people here. I'm like, all right, do your thing, So, but yeah.
And then I feel like those are the kind of people that end up having epics and stuff in the night when they're like, they don't have a big experience rappelling, and then they're 8 pitches up and the sun goes down because they waited too long at the base, and now they're epicking in Red Rock trying to rappel and they're getting their rope stuck. It's just like just ends up being a mess.
Yeah, that speaking of that, that party that was at the base of epinephrine with us that let us go first, we ended up being like we were, down the descent, we were hiking out, and we could still see their headlamps up on the climb. So they, they definitely were slower than us, but because they were the last party, like they were climbing out in the dark, and yeah, that can happen. Not fun.
How do we want to close this off? We're getting close to the time, the sweet spot. Is there anything else we haven't covered yet?
I mean, one thing I was gonna say was like it's I guess this kind of ties into climbing as a father too, but like after when I had my first kid, I, totally thought, and after that like Joshua Tree experience or whatever, I totally thought like, oh man, I'm just never gonna my climbing like kind of sucked for a long time from where it was before. And I just thought like, oh man, I'm never gonna climb. Or if you get injured, you kind of have that feeling of like, you guys know way more than me, I'm sure, but even like a small injury, it's like, oh, I'm just never gonna be good again. And I've learned with the kids, like, yeah, you have a little period, after my first kid where I kind of sucked for a while, but then I came back way stronger than ever afterwards. And I don't really know what that was attributed to, but I was like within 6 months of that of having my first kid, I was already climbing like harder than I ever had, and planning big objectives still. And um, I hear of other parents who take even way longer than that off. Like they just stop climbing for years while they have young kids, and then like get back into it. And they're out like AJ is out there brushing as ever still, and I know he took like many years off for his kid. And but yeah, it's just I guess I would try to encourage anybody, whether you're injured or whatever it is, if you're taking time off, it could be a good thing. And you got the passion, like stick with it. You'll get better. You'll get stronger if you put your mind to it. Yeah. That wasn't really words of wisdom, but
I honestly think it was. We recently just spoke to like Mary Eden, and she, had like a similar kind of thing where she was going through some issues or whatever. She took a break off, and part of her, reminder was like, like it's like, why are you climbing? Like if you're just going through this mechanized process, or you're not feeling good, or you're not feeling passionate, or you're having some issues with it, like sometimes the best thing for you to do is actually take a step back, and like gain some perspective, have a break, give your mind a break, and then you can kind of return to whatever you're doing really revitalized and feeling good. And of course, from a physiological standpoint, frequency and consistency does provide these adaptations to get better as a climber and stronger. But at the same time, you alluded to this at the beginning, Bryce, like climbing is such a psychological and mental sport. And that doesn't just go for like your mental fortitude to be able to deal with the sharp end. Like you also need a lot of drive and passion and willpower to want to be there and want to engage with the environment. And I think sometimes, we can kind of lose sight of that a little bit of like, it's kind of supposed to be fun. You should be enjoying yourself. You should be having a good time. And yeah, sometimes you can take a break and come back and feel better than ever.
yeah, I also do want to say, Kyle, I don't think I mentioned this so far, but when you had seen that I got into climbing, I was like pretty, I don't know, like not starstruck, but I remember being like, wow, Kyle is freaking good. Like I remember seeing your Instagram, and I don't know what you were climbing at the time, but it was way harder than, a new beginner would be climbing. And I was just like, wow, he's the real deal. And then I forget how it came about, but that first Red Rock trip, I was just like so stoked to get out and climb with you. And I was like, oh man, this guy's like really good. And I think we romped around Calico Basin, and I got like destroyed by like all the 10 and 11 classics that you've let me follow. Um, and then that next day we did Triassic Sands, and that was like my big lead. And I know I had said at the time I was like, oh yeah, I'm climbing like 510, which was really like extreme, like pushing grade, and being super pumped from that first day with you. I remember just barely pulling off Triassic Sands, but I guess just I was super super thankful for you showing me the ropes out here, and catching the red rock bug through that. And um, yeah, so thanks, man. That was
Hell yeah, man.
you. I think you
Appreciate
had
that.
a big impact on my climbing progression,
So
and
that's
being
awesome to hear, man.
one of the few partners that I've had since the beginning, I guess. So
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah, it's been cool to see how far you've come. You know, it was funny. We were at dinner last night, and you're like, "Yeah, you know, like, you know, it's I'm better than you now."
That's not what I said. That's not what I said. I said I'm happy to be the rope gun now, whereas you were my rope gun in the past.
But no, I mean it's all good, man. You know, like my perception on climbing is changed so much since the injury, and I'm super psyched to see how far you've come and how psyched you've been about climbing. And yeah, linking up again and climbing these last few days have just been super rad, man. We make a great team, and look forward to climbing in the future again with you.
Yeah, let's go do El Cap.
Hell yeah, yeah. Let's close off with your list. What do you got planned for 2024?
The main thing would be El Cap. I'm super inspired by the nose. I had a partner and I who both got into aid climbing at the same time, and we did west face of Leaning Tower. That was my first aid climb, and it went just like perfectly smooth. Everything was great, but it was June, so it was super hot, so we had to take a few months off. We were going to go back and get the nose in the fall, and then he got injured like 2 days before our trip, and so then I put it on the back burner with I was like, I got kids, like I don't need to be another aid climbing the nose right now. But then when I got injured, I kind of got re-stoked on aid climbing because I was like, well, I can't climb my hardest grades anymore, but I can still aid climb, and I really, really, really want to do the nose. So hoping to get back out there in March and get a little refamiliarized with the big wall, and then hopefully do El Cap this year. Just kind of like, how can that not be one of your life goals as a climber? And there's some cool stuff out here I'd love to do. Cloud Tower, which you were telling me about, and Original Route, some of those harder, bigger trad lines. But otherwise, just enjoying the family life and trying not to put on too much dad bod.
Oh man. Well, awesome. Yeah. I mean, thanks for coming on the show, man. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and pleasure climbing with you these last few days. And yeah, just thanks for being here.
For sure.
Yeah,
Thanks for
really
having
great
me.
having you on, man. Nice to meet you, Bryce.
Nice meeting you, Max. Take care, guys.